They start council meetings this way, but back in the spring, council was at a fundraiser for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. It was a bowl off, and someone said, if the kids team beats the council team, can we name them mayors for the day? And I said, well, what are the chances of that? Come on. So I said, sure, we could do that. I was counting on Councillor LeBlanc, and he let us down, didn't you? But let me tell you something. We watched Tristan Huff, and he bowled like a sharpshooter. So if anyone wants to lose a bowling match, I would suggest you bowl against Tristan Huff. I think that would be a good way to go. So we're going to get these young people to call our meeting to order, our 6 mayors for the day. And I believe you start, don't you, James?
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Welcome to all staff members of council, staff, and members of the public.
We ask you that you please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices.
We call this planning meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. by formally recognizing that we are meeting on Aboriginal land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people from the beginning.
As settlers, we were grateful for the opportunity to be stewards of this land and thank the generations of people who have taken care of this place for thousands of years.
In particular, we acknowledge the proud heritage of our neighbors from the Olduville First Nation and the Mohawks of the Bay and Quincy.
Thank you. So thank you, mayors, for the day. Appreciate that. And I'm going to get you to step out front because I have a little something for you all. Out front. And this says, congratulations, Honorary Mayor for a Day 2019. On behalf of the members of Municipal Council and the citizens of Brighton, we extend our sincere congratulations to you on this special occasion. As Honorary Mayor for a Day, your duties include attending and public speaking at a meeting of Municipal Council. We extend our best wishes for you and your continued interest in serving the public. Presented October 15th, 2019. Each of you get those. So Carter.
Did you say the full names? Can you say the full names, please?
Sure. Carter Bateman, Liam Bateman, Presley Dean, Lorelei Dean, James Dean. Sure that wasn't an accident. And Tristan Huff. Sure. So let's
Squeeze in.
don't stop smiling. Never stop smiling. Okay, thank you very much. You can sit with your folks in the gallery.
Carter, Liam. Cameras back there.
And just for everybody's information, this is Local Government Week in the municipality of Brighton, so that's why we decided to do that here tonight at this planning meeting. So I will begin with the motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc and seconded by Councillor Tadman. The Council amend the October 15th, 2019 planning meeting by replacing attachments number 2 and number 3 for agenda item 5.2, Cardinal View subdivision. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that Council approve the October 15th, 2019 planning meeting as amended. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, and if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. We have two delegations this evening. Our first is Jason Landry, request to amend zoning bylaw regarding structure types and restrictions. Mr. Landry, are you here? I am. Come on forward, please.
Just up front here.
Is it-
Right there.
Here?
Yep.
Yeah. And Mr. Councilman, can you help with the microphone, please? Mr. Landry, our meetings are all recorded, and delegations have 10 minutes to present their information to members of council.
So I may proceed.
You may.
First of all, I'd like to thank you all for entertaining my request today. My request comes from necessity and from the ideology of the federal government. The reason why I come here is that geographically, myself and my neighbors, we live in a bit of a bowl. The Brighton is known for its rolling valleys and knolls. And in doing so, with the lack of infrastructure, the ability to get services like broadband internet is unavailable unless you have line of sight with the different companies that offer business in the area, similar to like TELUS, Bell Mobility, Rogers, and the partner, largest partner lately, which would be Xplornet. So there was an agreement on the federal government and Xplornet in order to expand communications so that every member or every citizen can get onto the internet superhighway. Now, normally, I'm a nice quiet person. I like living out in the forest, and I don't want people bugging me, and I don't bug anybody else. However, the nature of my work and the way the world is going now is all documents are found online. And schooling, education, even my own job, who would think that the Department of National Defense would require you to do online courses? Well, here I am now, sitting at my property, unable to do these courses and further my career. So I went to the planning office, Landmark Associates, and I asked them if I could put a tower. Landmark Associates said that use is not permitted on your property. Well, that didn't make sense to me. So I looked at the permitted uses of properties, and all of them are basically in reference to financial gain, creating revenue or creating occupancy. If you take a look at the permitted uses chart, which is section 6.2, it's all based on enlarging the size of your house, enlarging the size of your occupants, and or generating revenue through either nursing home, personal services, daycare, and such. So I go back to Landmark Associated with the definition of structure, because what my intent is to build a tower, an antenna tower, so that I can actually receive service that the federal government has assisted in providing. Because of the knoll I'm in, because of the area I'm in. Now, I'm not alone in this. My neighbors are the same. There's at least about a dozen of us in this knoll that we can't see anything from our location because of the line of sight. We're in a bit of a bowl. We're topographically challenged, as I like to call it. So, contact Landmark again. I said, well, there's a structure, and the structure is deemed anything that is constructed of part, joined together, and attached or fixed permanently to the ground or any other structure. And they said, you're absolutely right, Mr. Landry. We apologize. However, the limitations based in the bylaw, which is, I believe, section 7.5, table 9, the highest you can go is 4.5 meters. Well, 4.5 meters doesn't help when your main building could be 9 meters tall. Well, I tried putting it on my roof. I can't get any service or anything like that. So I furthered this investigation and talked to my neighbors and thought, well, maybe I can ask council to see if they could do something about it. Now, I don't remember too long ago when I was young. Dad had a large antenna in the backyard, had one of those little machines that twisted the antenna around so you can catch some sort of cable or some sort of signal. Well, those towers still exist, and those towers are still in the county. Now, those towers have been repurposed, and there's grandfather clauses. Because when I go and I check the bylaws, and the bylaw would be 104, 2002, I look at all the different zoning areas and not a single zoning bylaw or amendment refers to a tower structure of any kind to receive signal. So all these towers in the county are grandfathered. And even I have one. I have one that's about 30 feet tall. And so I thought, well, geez, I'll just repurpose that. Unfortunately, I'm not able to because I talked to the provider. The provider has a lot of very smart people, and they say, topographically, I need to go 85 feet high in order for me to receive what the government and the CRTC claims as essential service, quality of life service. All right. Well, when I talk to Landmark Associates, your planners, they say that's not possible, and I need to rezone. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think that a tower isn't like a structure where we built a building that's 10 by 10 or 10 by 20 or a barn or a house or a garage. I think of an essential service, I think of things like hydro, natural gas. I don't need a permit for either one of those things. And so I dig further down and I go into Revenue Canada, wow. I go into NAVCAN and Transport Canada and I see what the regulations are for towers. And towers are very well documented and regulated, and when I surprise myself by looking at our own bylaws, we actually have rules in place for transmission towers. But I can't install one myself. We can have someone rezone their property, install a transmission tower as long as it's agreed upon by council. And they can install a very large tower, and it's just ironic that I noticed that there's one being proposed in the front lobby. So what I'm proposing to you is to make an amendment to the existing bylaw to include personal antenna towers. And through the research and through what I've seen, and after a topographical study, 30 meters would be probably the most that someone would need in the area. Regulations don't really start till 45 and 70 meters, and that becomes a marking issue, air obstacles, aerodromes. So if you live by a airport or if you're in an air corridor, and none of those things apply to the area. And it all gives stipulations. You can go to Canadian Aviation Regulations at SOR 96 TAC 433, and it actually breaks down what is required for marking as an air obstacle. And then furthermore, when I look into the table, and I look at it, from the idea that when you all go home tonight, if you live in town, you're going to flick on Netflix or you're going to let your kids watch YouTube or whatever you do. But I don't have that ability. So what I suggest is a new addition to a new addition to definitions, and the new addition for definitions would be like a personal antenna tower. And then I'd also recommend for section 7.5, which is rural residential, table 9, and section 7.8, table 12, which would be for rural, is that the maximum height block be addressed as well with a personal antenna tower not exceeding, let's say, 3 meters. This would allow residents in the community outside of the infrastructure that has been provided to access the net and be able to access what the federal government deems as essential, and vital for us to continue. Now, the government of Canada has done a study that says 18% of Canadians go without services like this. And I would like to start the process with Brighton and potentially reduce our participation in that 18%. I know my neighbors would like it. What we'd like to try to avoid rezoning, historically, I haven't seen a single zoning bylaw for RU or RR that has the word tower. Actually, if you do a word search in the zoning bylaw, tower only comes up as an ornamental decoration on a house and or the precedent set by transmission towers. So this isn't a foreign policy. We have enacted this policy before. Now we just have to enact it for the residents in the area that do not have these services. I hope that I have your support in doing so. That's really all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Landry. I'm going to open the floor to members of council to ask any questions of clarification to you on your delegation.
Sure.
Did you have notes that you're able to share with the clerk's office?
I can make notes available to the clerk if she wants to make copies of the SOR or any of the tables or definitions that are in play right now.
I'll ask you maybe to be in touch with the clerk tomorrow.
Be great. Thank you.
About what documents might be appropriate for the minutes.
Right, in regards to federal regulation, because we don't need to regulate it ourselves, but the federal government already has, right? I think that'd be appropriate.
Are there any questions of clarification from members of council? Councilor LeBlanc.
Sir?
Yes. My name is Councilor LeBlanc. What part of the military are you from?
What part of the military am I
You
from?
said you were in the military.
Oh, I'm presently a serving member in 8 Wing or CFB Trenton. I've spent 20 years in service. The first 10 years was as a combat soldier at the CFB Palo. I was deployed overseas. I struck an IED and my life changed. I now service aircraft at 2 Air Movement Squadron and now I'm an instructor for air crew and mobile air movements around the world. And hence I have to take courses on this and maintain currencies, which I can't do it.
Yeah. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, sir.
Now I have some questions for you. Your 4.5 meters that you found, is that for a dwelling or is that for a tower or a structure?
Okay, well, a structure is defined in the bylaw. Structure means anything that is erected, built, or constructed, or parts joined together and attached, or fixed permanently to the ground. That is a structure. So when it goes into structure, we look into rural residential. That's what mine and most of my neighbors are zoned as because we don't have the acreage. And it actually says under maximum height, main building. So that'd be the main dwelling of the property. Main building is up to 9 meters. And then the accessory building, so any other building aside from your primary dwelling is 4.5 meters. So when talking to Landmark Associates, they're like, unless it's your main building, and I don't intend on living in a tower, I'm restricted to 4.5 meters.
So I was living in a bowl in Nova Scotia where I had absolutely zero coverage.
Right.
So I went to buy one of the things that they put on the boat so you can get cell phone coverage, not by satellite, it picks up anything. So you're out of sight, you could be over horizon. And they cost about $480, which I installed in my cottage in Nova Scotia. So I was probably 75 miles from the nearest tower and everything. And there I would get 5 bars, but within 20 feet of it. So then we just bought an
Councilor
extended.
LeBlanc, do you have a question?
Yes. Have you thought about using this?
Okay, so the technology that's used today, both in the new 5G network that Bell, Huawei, and Xplornet are all using right now, is line of sight technology. Now, there are cellular services that are available, actually, but if you look at all the cellular services maps, and they're starting to pull them off the net. So if you can, and you're really thinking about endorsing this, and I ask you to think about it, is that if you look at their maps, there's a part of County Road 26, a large part, about 1 kilometer long, maybe 2 kilometers wide, and then a little bit further out towards 41, that actually there's no coverage. So I've tried every means. I've spent probably more than you'd be comfortable with in spending, in excess of $10,000, trying to get different services and trialing different services before I wasted the hours of my time to get here tonight.
I have another question. Could I ask the planner this question?
No, you may not.
Okay. Did you look at the minor variance committee to look at a minor variance to put up your tower?
Absolutely, minor variance committee. So yes, going to a minor variance, that is a $2,000 fee where you may not get approved. But I don't think it should be part of the approval process. I think it should be in the bylaw. If we can put transmission towers, we're talking about powerful towers, radioactive signals that can injure people. If we can put that into the bylaw, I'm pretty sure we can put a personal tower in there.
One more question, Mayor.
Yeah.
Did you see the article in the Mayor where we're looking for committee members for the broadband committee?
Unfortunately, my time isn't spent, a lot of my time is not spent in the country. Unfortunately, I'm deployed a lot overseas around the world. So I can't commit myself to any type of those engagements at the moment. I would have loved to entertain that, but unfortunately, I'm not home now. I apologize.
Any other questions from members of council for clarification? Mr. Lander, thank you very much for your time, for bringing this to us. We will pass a motion in this regard, and we'll see where things go from there. And just to reiterate Councilor LeBlanc's point, thank you for your service to the country as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for entertaining me.
Thank you.
Let me read the motion as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councilor Anderson, seconded by Councilor Bateman, that council receives delegation from Jason Landry concerning the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw regarding structure types and restrictions. Councilor Anderson, as the mover, would you also like to refer this to staff for some advice? Councilor Bateman, would you agree? Mr. Ty, did you have any comments?
Yes, through the chair. I was the one who personally entertained Mr. Landry's initial inquiry, and it was unbeknownst to me, but when I consulted the municipality's comprehensive zoning bylaw, it did not include a rather typical section or provision that is quite simply called height exemptions. And that would capture precisely what Mr. Landry is speaking to council about. It would capture a silo on a barn. It would capture such a thing as a steeple on a church. Absolutely nothing in the comprehensive bylaw. So that being the case, according to the comprehensive zoning bylaw, you have no height exemptions for anything that exceeds the height of what's prescribed as built for buildings. So what I did shortly thereafter was I alerted the consultants who are working on the official plan review and the zoning bylaw update to this omission, and they are proposing to include that height exemption in the bylaw that's coming before council, and I believe there's a statutory public meeting maybe even next month.
And that height restriction would include that 33 meter restriction, or that 33 meter height that was discussed tonight?
That's correct.
Okay. I think it's appropriate to leave and refer to staff for advice and report. That could be through the consultant or through Mr. Ty or the CAO, but we'll see this come forward at a future meeting through our comprehensive zoning bylaw review at any rate. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion's carried. Our second delegation is Rhonda Bacon, CAO for the Lower Town Conservation Authority. A presentation of the Conservation Authority's business and upcoming changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. CAO Bateman. No relation.
No relation.
No relation
To anyone who is on the floor today that I know of.
Will your presentation be more than the 10 minutes?
I will try and be as quick as possible.
Very well.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Ostrander and councilors. I appreciate your entertaining my presentation tonight. Normally I'd be at council, but we wanted to get this in as soon as possible. So I'm here for two reasons tonight. First, to introduce myself. To those who don't know me, I am Rhonda Bateman. I'm the new CAO for Lower Trent. It's been 5 months, so I'm going to have to stop saying new. The second reason for my visit is outline changes coming to the Conservation Authorities Act. But first I want to talk about all the good things that we do in the municipality, right? So Lower Trent was established in 1968 under the Conservation Authorities Act. The purpose of the act is to provide for the organization and delivery of programs and services that further the conservation, restoration, development, and management of natural resources in watersheds in Ontario. Last year on Lower Trent's 50th anniversary, a new strategic plan for the next 20 years was developed, and the vision statement is there: healthy watersheds for healthy communities. And our mission statement: to protect land, water, and living things by working with and inspiring others. The mission statement really recognizes the importance of partnerships across our watershed with municipalities, local business, local landowners, and general residents. So as I said, we fall under the Conservation Authorities Act. Our regulations are Regulations 16306. I know you know all about that. And our Conservation Areas Act, Regulation 116. So these are currently the programs that are held at Lower Trent Conservation, and many of them are required under legislation, the environmental planning regulations, flood protection, and source water protection, as well as conservation lands. So the other programs and services we provide are custom focused and locally based, and their responses to local needs. So some are funded through municipal agreements, agreements with other agencies, such as the Bay of Quinte Remedial Action Plan Program, that is funded through the province and mostly through the federal government. I want to talk about the wealth of information garnered through some of these programs. Our monitoring program, I start with monitoring always, and why do we monitor? We gather data, water quality data especially, on the water flowing and stored within the watershed, which allows for science-based decision making. Monitoring results can identify where and what issues may be occurring, and what can be done to mediate the problems. We can use the data to identify trends. The data can assist us in seeing if an issue is getting better or an issue is getting worse, or new developing issues. One of the results from our watershed report card that was done last year was that there was a lot of data absent from our watershed. So these are the sites currently being monitored since, well, it's been 18 months, I guess. And our board agreed that increased monitoring was an important element of our business. So this is the result of one of the surface water monitoring maps from our watershed report card, and all that gray area, so you see dark green, light green, and then gray, all that gray area shows areas that do not have enough data or no data at all to be able to do any scientific information gathering. So that's too much gray. So here is an example with our increased monitoring, that map now shows tons and tons of different water monitoring locations. So we're going to have much more science. We've only had our second collection season, but we really need to further that. So as I said, the supplemental monitor is approved by the board in 2018. And we'll get more information as we do more testing, and that will assist us and the municipality to make better decisions for the benefit of the residents. I'm going to talk about a little bit of our education programs. So the first, so these are just the last 2 years. We've had, as you can see, in-class workshops. That's when our staff go to schools. So there are 5 classrooms, some at different schools, 164 participants, and so far this year, we classes 48 participants. Preparing for our watersheds is a program that is actually a contest, and it asks students in grades 7, 8, and 9 to answer the question, what can you do to improve your watershed? And students research local watersheds, they identify issues, upcoming and emerging issues, and they figure out the environmental concern, and they come up with a realistic solution. It doesn't end there. The program then rewards the students and the schools that submit the most creative, thoughtful, and innovative ideas. And then there's an implementation funding and community mentorship is available as a result of that. So not only do they do the research, figure out the problem, there's an implementation of their findings and potential solutions to the problem. So stewardship and outreach. In 2018, in Brighton alone, events we held in just in those 3 events in Brighton attracted 193 participants. And this year, the 3 that are listed there were at 124 participants. And that's in Brighton alone. And of course, we are doing events here at the watershed that everyone from across the watershed participates in. So stewardship, we have incentive programs to assist landowners in making good decisions as well for their lands and waters, such as riparian planting and livestock fencing and alternative water accessibility. And the municipality of Brighton itself was able to utilize funding for riparian planting at Butler Creek in 2017. And a Brighton resident was able to receive incentive funding for riparian planting at Butler Creek 3 years in a row. And our conservation lands benefits. We have 10 conservation areas and 7 natural habitat areas throughout the watershed. And, excuse me. So Proctor Park Conservation Area and Goodrich Wemyss and the Murray Marsh Natural Habitat Area are within Brighton area. Staff have been completing upgrades to the 91 acre Proctor Park, including addition of cedar rail fencing, establishing a Memorial Road walkway, and additional tree planting and other land improvements. Murray Marsh Natural Habitat Area has been undergoing a stewardship program of local tree planting, acting as buffers between the wetlands and the farmlands. So, of course, all of these conservation areas and other lands are available and to be used by residents at no cost. Many of conservation authorities throughout the GTA and major metropolitan areas in general charge a fee for accessing conservation areas. Our board recognizes the importance of having natural spaces available for residents of the watershed to enjoy. We have many hiking trails, and we're expected to improve some portions of our conservation areas to make a couple of them accessible to people with mobility issues this year. So I'm going to go on to the changes in the Conservation Authorities Act. There's 7 listed there. Those are the big ones. So as I said earlier, the Conservation Authorities Act is the overriding legislation for all 36 conservation areas, conservation authorities across the province. So these changes mostly have been developed based on the passage of Bill 108, More Homes, More Choices Act. And as far as governance, this aspect is the only one that has been enacted to date. All CAs were required to develop administrative bylaws to ensure transparency and governance rules before the end of 2018, and Lord Trent got them done in October 2018, October 1st. And immediately imposed upon our board members was the duty on every member of an authority to act honestly and in good faith with a view to furthering the objectives of the authority. Definition of mandatory, non-mandatory, we'll talk about that in a minute. Program and service fees, it's likely, that was probably likely due to the differences in charges and services between conservation authorities. It's very noticeable in larger centers that share borders, the differences in these services, the cost of these services. I'm not sure, I'm going to say this a lot, we're not sure the approach the province is going to make on some of these rules at this stage. But it would be interesting if a standardized fee structure was introduced, because it would be very difficult to implement across the province. Capital cost apportionment is being revisited for municipal service agreements and likely withdrawn. Not sure we see that going. We do not currently charge capital costs under any of our current service agreements. If it's capital, it's usually coming as a benefiting levy. Operating expense apportionment is being revisited as well, with a different appeal mechanism being proposed. We're not sure where that's going. I'll talk about our regulatory permits a little later. But enforcement and offenses, the introduction of stop work orders are proposed, as are increased fines. So mandatory programs and services, this is a real hot button issue with us because they're not truly defined. They're recognized as natural hazards, conservation lands, and the source protection program. We're not, and the fourth one there, programs and services related to authorities' duties, functions, and responsibilities, that may be there as a catch-all for wherever the province lands on what's mandatory and non-mandated. That may be a catch-all for ones they deem worthy. So the new legislation as drafted indicates that conservation authorities may provide other programs and services and to further its objectives, and if financing by a participating municipality is required, then the authority and municipality must enter an agreement to provide the program or service. And we have a historic great record of having reasonable agreements with our municipalities, and I believe that Brighton participates in all 3 of those agreements. So our regulation 16306, we know now there'll be a change in setbacks. There'll be a change in wetland setbacks and others which we're not sure. To date, these changes are being considered without consultation with conservation authorities. We've asked for participation, especially in the definition development for the regulations. We have received word that the Ministry of Environment and Conservation and Parks has begun consultation with conservation authorities. We have a tentative date set to meet with the minister's office. It's excellent news. As I said, we're up to date, and we would like some say in how things go. Whether they listen or not is another story. We're hoping so. So changes to the permitting process to streamline is one of the things out there. We think that's great. We've already undertaken systems to speed up the process. We have online screening tools, and we have online application forms. It's a lot easier for our staff to go through these as opposed to people bringing in applications in and going away and then coming back. We've made it a lot less onerous on the public. So as it says there, we're striving to work cooperatively with all 7 of our municipal partners. We will fulfill the legislative requirements in consultation with you, our partners. There's supposed to be a transition period applied to these changes when they are determined, and we are hoping between an 18 and 24-month consultation period or a transition period once we fully understand the direction the province is going and how we are to adhere to these new rules. So there's a picture of some of the events, few of the events that we actively participate in. So with your assistance, we'll continue to meet the needs of our watersheds and residents, and we are asking for your continued support in the important work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. I'll open the floor to members of council for questions and clarification. Members of council? Councilor Pat.
I have had the privilege to sit on Lower Trek Conservation for many years, and I see the importance of what they do, and more as I learn all the science of it, which is a lot more than I'll ever be able to take on. But I know how important this is to protect our wetlands. We've had flooding in 2017 and 2019, and they've done a great job of letting each one of the municipalities know where we're at in that. But there's so much more that goes on, like the Bay of Quinte raft, for one thing. Now it's a healthy bay after years of working on it. And I know through talking to the commercial fishermen that they're catching quite a lot of fish in Bay of Quinte, but they can hardly catch anything in Brighton Bay. So that may be something that we will be pushing in the future to have a look at. But the one thing that disturbs me the most is that the conservation area has been operating 1991
Since 1995.
Was it 95? And would you like to tell this group what we were getting then up until last year?
We were getting just over $133,000, and that's for our mandatory Section 39, which is flood warning, flood response, and maintenance of erosion control structures and dams. And the province cut that by 48%, so we lost $63,500.
But expected to do the same work.
Expected to do the same work and mandated to do so under regulation.
And the conservation authorities have been screaming to get the money raised from the 1995 level, and now they've cut it in half. But just as when people start screaming, it seems the province listens. And so I think the conservation areas need to scream, because this is a very important work that we do.
There is a communications plan being developed through Conservation Ontario and the other conservation authorities to go out to get the people who actually use our areas and the municipalities. We need the people who use the service to speak loudly, because we're not being listened.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or clarification? Councilor Rowley?
Thank you, Mayor. Benthic biomonitoring. Could you please explain what that is?
I will. That is it's a look at what critters are living under the stream bottom. So there are they're an indicator of how healthy your watershed is. So there's all kinds of little critters living in there, and they're all microscopic, and when they identify, we don't do it, we send that away to get identified, we do the sampling, and then come back with a count of how well our watershed's doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Tappan.
I know you like a question, so I'm going to try and make this into a question. But we have three really good areas that are free to the public. So I guess my question is, and hopefully that everybody here can say that we participate in those. And if you haven't, Proctor Park, Goodwin Loomis, and also the one that was just donated to us a few years ago are excellent places, and they're all free, and there's all kinds of acreage there that you can enjoy. Is that a question?
Lots of trails.
No, it was not.
But I get away with it, right?
Well, there are things you seem to get away with that others don't, yes.
Because she's old.
Now, you can think it, but you can't say it. Any other questions of clarification? Thank you very much for your presentation, it's appreciated. I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Vink, seconded by Councilor Bateman, that council receives the presentation from Rhonda Bateman, CAO, Lower Trent Conservation Authority. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Is there any opposed? Motion is carried. We'll move into our statutory public meeting this evening. I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Vink, seconded by Councilor Bateman. The council move into the October 15, 2019 statutory public meeting portion of the agenda at 7:11 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. We have one item in our statutory public meeting this evening. It is with regard to Cardinal View subdivision. The purpose of the application is for council to make a decision on a plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendment for the following application, being file numbers sub 2019-01 and Z06-2019. The owner is 1133253 Ontario Limited. The applicant is RFA Planning Consultant Incorporated. The location is Part Lot 2, Concession 1, being Part 1 of Plan 39R, 13626 east of Ontario Street. And Mr. Ty, by what method and on what date was notice of the plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications given?
Thank you, Your Worship. Notice of the applications was sent by first-class prepaid mail on September 24th to all property owners within 120 meters. Notice was also circulated to all the agencies as required under the Planning Act. The sign was erected on the property, and in addition, notice was published in the Brighton Independent on September 26th.
Thank you, Mr. Ty. Would you please explain the background and purpose regarding the plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications?
The proposed plan of subdivision entails approximately 1.09 acres with 56 feet of frontage on at the end of Foxden and 20 meters of frontage or 66 feet at the end of Deerfield. The subdivision is proposed to comprise 4 semi-detached dwellings for a total of 6 dwelling units, each relocated on a separate and distinct lot. The proposed layout features the proposed new street, referred to Street A on the plan of subdivision, which would connect to both Foxden and Deerfield at the north and south ends of the subject property respectively. The development will be on full municipal services. The proposed new street also extends or adds to the frontage of the adjoining property to the north, thereby potentially facilitating development of that northerly adjoining property in the future should something come forward. The proposed purpose and effect of the proposed zoning bylaws to rezone the subject property from the future development zone to urban residential 2 exception to 40. The rezoning will serve to prevent residential land uses on the property and otherwise fulfill a condition of consent of draft plan approval in the event that the council grant draft plan approval.
Thank you, Mr. Ty. Does the owner or applicant wish to make any comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is Sean Legere, Senior Planner with RFA Planning Consultant. I am the project planner and agent for the proposed development known as Cardinal View Subdivision. The developer and builder is Henderson Developments, to which a representative is present tonight. I will provide an overview of the land use planning process for the project. Presenting with me this evening is Brian Keane from Jewel Engineering. Brian will review the engineering studies that were prepared in support of the applications, including traffic, servicing, and stormwater management. In March of this year, we filed applications for a draft plan of subdivision and a rezoning to the municipality of Brighton. This public meeting will consider both the subdivision and rezoning. The subdivision lands are located east of Ontario Street and north of Raglan Street, between Foxden Drive and Deerfield Drive. Development exists on all sides of the property, which consists of single detached dwellings. The Tovey development is currently under construction to the north. Some activity has recently taken place on the site to support the construction of 2 single detached dwellings. Unfortunately, the image in front of you is a little dark. What we see here in the background are 2, that might help a little. There you go, that helps. The 2 dwellings in the background there are new dwellings. Henderson also owns these lands and is constructing these dwellings, which I just pointed out, on recently severed lots. Frontage and access for these lots are off Ontario Street and are functionally separate from the subdivision lands, Foxden and Deerfield. This is the current view looking north along the property line from Deerfield. So clearly these were taken on different days, much nicer, brighter day. This is the current view looking south along the property line from Foxden Drive. There is a 3rd lot off Ontario Street, also owned by Henderson. The number is 205B. It has remained vacant as it is intended to be utilized for construction vehicles for the prospective subdivision lands. An entrance permit application was submitted to the municipality on April 18th, and the developer is currently awaiting its approval and the culvert to be installed. The Cardinal View subdivision proposes 8 lots and a public road as a single phase to be created on lands consisting of 0.44 hectares or 1 acre. You will note this and a few subsequent slides differ from the deck in your agenda package. This is due to municipal comments and changes from Friday, just this past Friday. There is a modification to enlarge Street A to a similar configuration than originally proposed to maximize the road allowance for future planning purposes while still providing an appropriate 1-foot reserve. This did not change the proposed road design, which will be reviewed in a moment. The public road denoted here as Street A will connect to Foxden Drive and Deerfield Drive. This connection was identified during initial consultation with the municipality as the desired plan to develop the property where the road network and block would be completed. From a planning perspective, this will improve the connectivity and walkability of the neighborhood. Our engineer will describe later other reasons relating to servicing for completion of the road network. The proposed road allowance has been laid out to municipal standard at 20 meters width. The proposed road will be constructed by the developer to municipal standards according to the subdivision agreement. As noted earlier, a 1-foot reserve is proposed along the northern extent of the road allowance for future planning purposes by the municipality. 7 detached dwellings by Henderson Developments are proposed to be built for the Cardinal subdivision. They will have a similar appearance to the singles under construction off Ontario Street with a mix of siding, stone, and brick materials. The units will be 1-story in height, featuring hip-style roofing with front gables and single-car garages. The development site plan here shows the arrangement of potential new dwelling units along with driveway configurations. There will be sidewalks provided on the east side of the street, opposite of the dwelling units, and will connect to the existing network from Deerfield Drive. The previous slide and the site plan demonstrate the garages will not project past the main building facade. Between this and the front gable detailing, it is intended to diminish the presence of the garage. Most zoning bylaw provisions will be met or exceeded by the plan, which will be elaborated in a moment. The mapping change proposed to Schedule A Map 10 of the zoning bylaw is relatively straightforward. The entire subdivision lands are proposed to be rezoned from future development FD zone to an urban residential R2 exception holding zone to allow for the semi-detached dwellings. Site-specific provisions will be outlined in a moment. The provision will require all conditions of draft plan approval to be satisfied. The subject property is located within an existing built-up urban area of the municipality of Brighton, east of Ontario Street and north of Raglan Street. The local streets providing access to the subdivision are Foxden Drive and Deerfield Drive. The total site area again is 0.44 hectares. That is subject to the applications for draft plan approval and rezoning. Given the scale of development, the project will be proposed as a single phase. The surrounding land uses are characterized as residential. The property is currently vacant. The subject property is designated low-density residential on official plan Schedule A land use map 2 Brighton urban area. Foxden, Deerfield, and Lance streets surrounding the subdivision are local roads on Schedule B transportation map 2. Raglan and Cedar Street to the south and east of the subdivision are collector roads, and Ontario Street to the west is an arterial road. Development within the low-density residential designation shall be at a maximum of 30 units per net hectare, where single-detached, semi-detached, and duplex housing types are permitted. The proposed net density of the Cardinal View subdivision will be 30 units per net hectare, which excludes the road allowance area. It therefore satisfies the threshold for low-density residential development, albeit at the higher end of the spectrum. The proposed semi-detached dwellings are permitted and an official plan amendment is not required. The official plan also encourages a blend of housing types. The Cardinal View will provide a new but compatible housing type at a low density to the existing neighborhood, satisfying the official plan. A rezoning of subdivision lands to an urban residential 2 exception zone with special and holding provisions is required. Special provisions are requested for minimum lot frontage, maximum lot coverage, and maximum driveway width, which are outlined in red on the slide here. The builder recognizes that garages are often used for personal storage and not vehicles. Therefore, the builder is requesting a maximum 6-meter driveway width to provide side-by-side parking to mitigate on-street parking. Given the proposed lots exceed the minimum area requirement and all building setbacks can be satisfied, there are no apparent impacts on surrounding land uses as a result of the proposed 50% maximum lot coverage, and the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The requested lot coverage is also partly due to the bungalow style of the proposed semis, and the builder wishes to construct, which results in a slightly larger footprint than if it was 2 stories, for example. We'll now ask engineer Brian Keane of Jewel Engineering to come up and review traffic, servicing, and stormwater management.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you. So we provided a traffic study, a very small study for this road network, and we found that there would be no impact no negative impact for the traffic flow. We also explored this at length with staff to make sure that the design was compatible with their plans, and staff also was very eager to see this connection made. What it will do is eliminate the 2 dead ends, Foxden and Deerfield. Currently, the bulbs that you see are substandard. They don't quite meet the sizing requirements, and it was initially planned that those 2 would be extended through at some point in time in the future. So they were considered temporary dead ends. So the traffic made no recommendation for any other improvements at the site. Water and servicing, again, the water hit dead ends on each of the cul-de-sacs. So our proposal would be to loop the water mains through. It will improve water pressures for both cul-de-sacs and it provides reliability for the community. In addition, the sanitary will be serviced off of Deerfield in the south, so there's a 200 millimeter water main that will be extended through. Stormwater management, what we're doing here is connecting a storm sewer through Street A down into Deerfield, and that storm sewer along Street A will be oversized to provide storage. What it will do is to help reduce the peak flows to make sure there's no flooding impacts. Water quality will be provided in the Harbour Point stormwater facility that will receive drainage. The rear yards will head in the direction of Ontario Street, and there will be infiltration provided for rear yards, and there will be no flooding impacts either. And that's it for servicing.
Before I conclude, I just have some proposed changes to the draft conditions that are attached with the staff report, in light largely due to the revised draft plan from Friday. Again, we've reviewed all the conditions prepared by the municipal planning consultant, and I have only just a few. So these are requested. We request that condition number 1 be updated to reflect the October 11th draft plan presented this evening. With this, condition 3 may be removed as it relates to blocks that are not proposed. We also wish to request that condition 10B be removed, which is requesting an environmental site assessment. There is no understanding that any previous use has contaminated the site. The site is surrounded by residential development on all sides, including on newly severed lots, and just abutting the property, and we are unclear where the concern lies. Typically, for planning purposes, environmental site assessments are necessary if the land use is changing from commercial or industrial to residential. In this case, the property has simply been vacant for many years, for some time. So to summarize the planning components for the Cardinal View subdivision project, the site consists of 0.44 hectares of vacant land, designated low-density residential under the official plan, and abuts an existing neighborhood. The proposal consists of 8 semi-detached dwelling units. There has been careful consideration of land use planning criteria, housing market, density analysis, building setbacks, and servicing in preparing the draft plan of subdivision. The policies of the Brighton official plan and the Northumberland official plan that set out criteria to be considered when creating the subdivision, new subdivisions in low-density residential areas have guided the design process for the project. The application for draft plan approval is consistent with the 2014 provincial policy statement, Brighton and Northumberland County official plans, and represents good planning. Thank you for your time. The engineer and I are here to help answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation, both you and Mr. Keane. Now I will ask, is there anyone present who wishes to speak in favor of the applications? There are none noted. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition to the applications? Come forward, please, and state your name for the record, if you will.
My name is Kent Cook. I live at...
You have to do it into the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The meetings are recorded.
That's fine. Happened before. My name is Kent Cook. I live at 25 Deerfield Drive. And with me today are a number of the homeowners from both Deerfield and Raglan, representing some 24 homeowners. That's the vast majority of the houses on Deerfield. There are also a number of people here from Fox Den. We are opposed to the proposal to create a street joining Fox Den and Deerfield. There was within our community a very commonly held belief that the area would become a park. That's a pretty welcome idea because there is no park for children, including close proximity to either Deerfield or Fox Den. I think the nearest one is off Raglan down by Cedar. The basis of this belief is difficult to ascertain, as there's nothing to indicate in the planning department a basis for saying. That notwithstanding, for many years this end of the street has been used for kids to play an unending basketball game for young ones to learn to drive and for our neighborhood to enjoy our neighborhood barbecue. That wouldn't be possible if the street came through. What effect the change might have had on purchases on Deerfield recently is impossible to ascertain, but at least one homeowner would not have known what is now contemplated was going to happen. It would be unfortunate if there was a diminution in the value of the home. It's a very quiet street. That's what makes it very nice. And indeed, Toby, homes built on Cove, which is the extension, if you will, of Deerfield, are priced higher than are those on Raglan due to the builder's anticipation that street traffic would be lower and therefore quieter. It should be noted there's currently substantial development in the neighborhood. This has meant a noticeable increase in traffic, early morning to evening noise. Many of the trucks, heavy equipment operators show very little regard for seniors, children, and indeed stop signs or speed limits. An addition of an intersection at the west end of Deerfield would exacerbate the noise and the danger. We well understand the town departments are advocating change, thinking that water service, emergency, and snow clearing efficiencies will be enhanced and service improved. Nor are we objecting to the building of the residences that are under discussion. What we are asking, because no one consulted with the neighborhood about the loss of our cul-de-sac, and that's a valuable thing to us. If you've ever lived on one, you'll know that it has quite an impact on the way of life. Nor did the town or the planning department ask us what we thought. We would like to propose to council that this application be delayed and that the planning department ascertain if there is an alternative to building the street and therefore impacting on the two cul-de-sacs. We're not opposed to development. That's good for the tax base, that's good for employment, that's good for the builder. But we don't see that building these residences should necessitate us losing those cul-de-sacs. Mr. Mayor, I thank you very kindly.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Is there anyone else present who wish to speak against? Come forward, please.
I'm really glad you're out, Chair.
Careful.
Thank you. I have reading is okay, I presume?
It is. Just introduce yourself for the record, please.
I am Dan Gervanus of 199 Ontario Street.
I'm sorry, Dan
Gervanus.
Gervanus?
Spelled G-I-R-D-V-A-I-N-I-S.
Thank you.
I have a few more letters in there.
Will you get there one more?
Anyways, I have reason to believe that the Cardinal View site plan is deficient and should not be approved at this time. I believe the main deficiency is the roadway where it abuts my property, namely my backyard. I have in my possession an engineered roadway drawing, overview drawing, which I can make available as copies to council if they need it. For the subdivision that's owned by Mr. Waterhouse, and it's dated November 2018. The drawing shows part of the roadway on my property and is going through my backyard. I have to believe that this site plan, this November 2018 roadway drawing, is to municipal standards and would be required as part of an approvable site plan. I was requested by Mr. Ty in early 2019 to deed the required land to the municipality for free in order to complete this Cardinal View roadway. That request failed, along with negotiations with Mr. Waterhouse. If council approves this site plan, then I assume council is stating that the August 2019 roadway overview, which I have a copy of as well, and available to council if they need it, meets municipal standards, and my property will not be required for the betterment or enhancement of the Cardinal View roadway. If my property is required, then I insist you deny the Cardinal View application and send it back for redesign or renegotiation. Now, please understand, my wife and I are not against this subdivision as it stands. I believe in development. The houses look nice. I'm quite satisfied. They're single story. I'm satisfied with the development. If this site plan is approved, then I respectfully request that council agree and state on the record today, giving me the assurance that the municipality will at no time, now or in the future, put a claim on my property by means of any condition of severance or application with regards to Cardinal View roadway or any aspect of the Cardinal View subdivision. And I would, upon reading the conditions that came through on Friday, on page 1, number 3, part B, that says the owner shall on the final plan provide separate blocks on 1 and lot 2, and I have copies of those that I can supply to the council, where they say that he must, for future widening of the municipal right-of-way. Now, when I look at that, expansion of that, what that does, in my opinion, is change the 2019 site plan back to the November 2018 site plan, with the only requirement of it being my property to finish off a municipally acceptable road design. I also have a copy here from that was part of that, where on here where my properties here stated, potential single detached lot, lands to be acquired, which I can make available to council. I think I said enough.
Thank you, Mr. Gurdanis.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Good thing you spelled it.
Well done.
Could you please provide the information you've given today, not to council, but to the planner?
Will I be able to make copies of it tomorrow at the library or something like that?
Anytime, and then you can take it down to the planning department of 67 Sharp Road.
I've been there before.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present who would like to speak in opposition to the application? Come forward.
You sure did. You sure did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and staff present, and the planning commissioner as well. My name is David Francis. I'm at 37 Deerfield Drive. If you look at the diagram, I would be found just south of the proposed roadway in the cul-de-sac, not dead ends, by the way, as the engineer had stated. This is a truly a wonderful neighborhood. I've been there for about a year. And when I moved in last November, we had a bit of a snowfall. And if you think about last November, you probably remember that snowfall. And when, I came out of my first door, my first day in this brand new property, I had two neighbors, George and Harris, fighting over who was going to snow blow my property. That's Brighton, okay? That's Brighton beyond this area, and that's Brighton that I think is worth protecting. And that's a neighborhood worth protecting. If you look in the Foxton and our area, and I know the councilors and the mayor has driven around and seen the subject property and the nature of what's in that neighborhood, it's a wonderful place. And I'm a dean over at Loyalist College. I want to tell as many people as I possibly can, move to Brighton. You know, it's an amazing place and things are just getting better all the time. Fresh mayor, fresh CAO, a new story going ahead, ambitious plans for Brighton, looking into areas like Industrial Park. How do we diversify tax base? These things are impressive, and this is the story that I think is being well told here. Now, this particular area, of course, I'm next to it, so it's not surprising that I would take a position to be opposed. The reason I'm opposed is because the nature of the neighborhood is not serviced well by the nature of this development. What has been approved on Ontario Street is nice. You know, we've got two properties that seem to make sense, that have a good frontage and a good area in the back, and will really, you know, provide an opportunity for more people to come to our community and enjoy the lifestyle that we're trying to protect. If you look at these subject lands, you know, then again, cul-de-sacs, not dead ends, I have a serious concern about the nature of that street, and one perspective I can bring that is a bit unique is living at the end of the southernmost cul-de-sac. I come in usually at 5:45, 6 p.m. after a long day of deaning or whatever I do at the college. And the sun, like, you guys have got to imagine some of the safety issues here. I want more consideration happening. When you do civil engineering, you do have to consider celestial objects, and it's a very dangerous time of the year with the angle of the sun. I know an earlier version of some of these proposed plans involved a breakaway gate at that southernmost cul-de-sac. And I suspect part of the reason of that was to make sure that if you did need emergency vehicles in that area, you would have the ability to do so. Fire engines could get access from the south, from the north, but an emergency gate does provide the premise of being able to control traffic better. So beyond traffic humps and other typical means of consideration, you know, some of the things that have been proposed in previous iterations, I would urge council and the mayor to think about, and some of the reasons that some of those things have been put in there. Safety is a major issue on both of those cul-de-sacs, and I think a throughway there with that type of roadway, there's going to be collisions, and those collisions are going to involve fatalities. They're going to involve vehicle to person, vehicle to vehicle, and that's going to be something that I don't think we want to have on our hands as we move ahead into this type of development. So, to summarize, the reason I'm speaking today is there are alternatives. You've approved two properties on Ontario that suit the nature of community. You could approve similar development on these subject lands and look at alternatives for access to that large roadway that would connect the cul-de-sacs, not dead ends. You have access to Ontario, you have access to the north or the south, and there are some things you could do to preserve the nature of property, including keeping both cul-de-sacs in place and doing residential development of one additional house on both, protecting the interests of the developer as well. So that's all I have to present to council for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present, sir?
Mr. Mayor, council, staff members. My name is Robert Roy. I live on 12 Deerfield Drive. I didn't prepare anything because I didn't know which way this was going. My comments after a question would be to council and to the developers behind us. Have you guys ever played hockey on the streets? Street hockey? What a great place to play it. And they play it down at that end. They have all kinds of things down there. What's wrong? Why can't we have a green space? That's a nice green space. Leave a green space for us. Don't take away a park from the kids. If it was proposed, I don't know if it ever was. But why not a park? We don't have one, and we got lots of kids. And I find it a little offensive when I'm sitting next to somebody down here who finds a lot of comments that people are up here are making that opposed to this here are finding it humorous and finding it funny. If they can't conduct themselves properly in these meetings, then maybe they shouldn't be here. But that's about all I have. Please, leave our street alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. Is there anyone else present who wishes to speak in opposition? I see a hand at the back. Right here. Can we get the lights back on in the room? please. Thank you. Go
My
ahead.
name is Terry Barber. I'm at 199 Ontario Street as well. And our property is at the end of the design that you have there. And as my husband mentioned before, that the original design was to encroach on our property there and to make the road what appeared to be safer and in a nicer curve. The design that we just were given just a few minutes ago shows that it's very sharp, a much sharper curve now. And we were concerned with the initial one that we got on Friday, but this is now amended again. Now, our concern is that anybody that might be going up and down that road, and if it was black ice or whatever, they would be careening towards our backyard, and there's nothing stopping them there. And so if you're going to approve this, then we would ask that you put a regulation guardrail there so that anybody, if they're going to crash, they're going to crash on the guardrail and not careen into our backyard where our children, grandchildren, or our property is at risk. So we're going to ask that you consider that we're protected there. And the other issue I have is we have a lot of beautiful cedar, really very mature cedar trees that run along the side of our property and along the, where that road's going to be connecting. There's some mature trees there, and those trees suck up a lot of water. And our pump is going all the time as it is, and you remove all those trees that are sucking up water and cleaning our air, what are we left with? Flooding in our basements. And these houses may not have basements, but my house does. And I don't know about all the other houses there, but we do not want to see any water in our basements as a result of this. And I don't know, putting something at the end at Deerfield there is going to help us at the other end. So I would like to keep all those trees because they're beautiful and they help the environment, and they're right on the property line. So I want that to be considered, and also the protection of our property. And I guess that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Barber. Is there anyone else present who wishes to speak in opposition to the applications? Are there any questions or comments of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment or subdivision agreement from members of council? Councilor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one question for our planner, maybe he could just clarify for me the easement or the property lines if they have to change for the gentleman on 199 Ontario. I don't quite understand, as that's kind of new information now, so if you could just clarify for me what that entails. Thank you.
Mr. Ty.
Through the chair, with respect to council's consideration of approval or not approving the development before you this evening, there will be no changes to the existing property limits.
That's an answer to her question.
Be no changes to the property limits of 199.
Thank you, Mr. Dye. Does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't answer your question.
Sir, this is no longer an opportunity for members of the public to speak. Councilor Rowley?
So there will be no expropriation or any easements or anything now or in the future for the owners of 199 Ontario?
Through the chair, if at some point in the future, and it was talked about discussions between the planning department, planning staff, and the owners of 199 about their future intentions, what they might like to do with the most easterly end of their property, at such time as, for example, a severance application comes through, whether or not it comes through, then I did not make comment that we would be taking their land. I was simply identifying the possibility that the municipality may consider as a condition of granting the consent to sever, the possibility of a road widening at that location. And if you look at the most recent plans that were circulated to council on Friday, as well as the owners of 199. I took the liberty of circulating them to that homeowner as well. We are talking about a mere 3 feet into the corner of the property because of the changes that the municipality have made to the north end of Street A.
Thank you.
Councilor LeBlanc?
Yes, through you, Chair, for the planner. With, sorry, my iPad died. With property 199, is there sufficient road frontage that if they want to sever their back lot, if they want to put a second dwelling there to come off of the street or off of Deerfield, and also the last council allowed them to have a driveway to access their backyard, are those still there, the driveway, and do they have sufficient frontage so they can divide their property in case they want to sever off their back lot and build a second one?
Mr. Guy?
Through the chair, there is an existing entrance off of the end of the existing street into the rear yard of 199. However, by virtue of the changes made to the draft plan that again were circulated to council and the property owner on Friday, they now have an additional 66 feet on the end of Street A. Prior to that change, and in the event that council does not approve the application before you, they do not have adequate street frontage on the existing street at the end.
Deputy Mayor.
They would need a minor variance.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So my understanding is that there will be a road used temporarily during construction coming off of Ontario Street. Is that correct?
Yes, the intent, through the chair, the intent is that construction, traffic construction activity would come through the one remaining existing vacant lot from Ontario Street.
Follow up? Yeah, so when construction is done, is the idea that that will then be built on when construction is complete?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilor Catton.
I do believe I heard that this satisfies the provincial policy statement and our own policy statement. And because the province is mandating affordable houses, or encouraging affordable houses and mandating low density buildings. So in your opinion, and as I've read this, you recommend that this go forward?
Through the chair, the proposal before council this evening conforms to and otherwise maintains the spirit and intent of the road plan, the provincial policy statement, the county official plan, and Brighton's own official plan in terms of a form of infilling at this location, a form of intensification, more houses, which is what the recent and most recent changes to planning legislation has spoken to. In my opinion, this proposal adheres to those.
Councilor LeBlanc.
Thank you for your, through you, Chair. Thank you for your answer. My second question has to do with stormwater management. Last spring, we had a lot of flooding in this area, especially on the in Deerfield. With the enhanced swale that they're putting in, with the gravel beds and everything to bring it to Harbor Bay, will this ease the flooding in that area?
Through the chair, I'm not an engineer, however, as part of the process of assessing the applications before council, we undertook a number of initiatives. First of all, we circulated the applications to Lower Trent. Lower Trent have come back and indicated they have no concerns with the stormwater, proposed stormwater. We also engaged our own engineering peer reviewers who not only peer reviewed the documentation submitted by the developer, but also had a meeting with the developer's engineer. They have no concerns with the stormwater. Apart from that, Your Worship, we do have Mr. Keene with us, who was the author of the stormwater management report, should council wish to redirect the question to him.
And I'm sure Mr. King may wish to speak when I ask if the owner applicant have any further comments. He could answer that question. That's what he chooses to do. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you again for staff. I just have a few questions that kind of tie into one thing. And I understand why the residents are upset about losing their cul-de-sac with this plan. I get that. So what I'm trying to determine, so when cul-de-sacs are made, are they made for permanent purposes? I guess give us an idea on that. Are there rules around cul-de-sacs? When people buy a house, is that sort of something that's talked about? Was there a plan for its parkland? Now, we've heard all these things. I'm just wondering if you're able to speak to some of that to give us some clarity.
Through the chair, in general terms, cul-de-sacs are typically most often found where a proposed development, the design of a proposed development comes forward where the most efficient use or layout for that property is around the cul-de-sac. A cul-de-sac very rarely is found adjacent to vacant land.
Councilor Anderson.
So to add to that, so it was common knowledge that these cul-de-sacs were temporary. I heard the word temporary. Right? Can I ask you that? Is it? No.
The question was for Mr. Ty. Mr. Ty.
Yes.
Through the chair, I'm not aware as to whether or not it was common knowledge. From a planning perspective, we viewed these cul-de-sacs as being temporary. As long as you have vacant land.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you have a follow-up?
Not yet.
Thank you. Councilor Anderson?
Just one other thing. It's hard to get your head around this. I think it's a great development. I see great potential here for the neighborhood. It's really unfortunate also that there was no parkland plan. I know we can't go backwards here, but trying to think of ways to resolve this where it's a win-win, and it's probably going to go ahead, but it's just it doesn't do a lot for me that there isn't really a lot of thought given into families and it's about people. And you mentioned trees and that. Well, things like that, sometimes they have to go, and I know what that's like too. So I just trying to get my head around how this could be done so everybody's satisfied.
As I read this application, it appears to conform to our official plan. It appears to certainly conform with the current government's want for increased housing supply. So the question I ask myself is, do we as a council approve this with our conditions, or do we let an OMB appeal approve it without our say-so? And that's really where they changed the name of the OMB, sorry. The Land Use Planning Appeals Tribunal now. And in which case then we get no say as to what that subdivision agreement may or may not look like. So this is our opportunity to ensure that the very things that this municipality needs in a subdivision agreement get put into a subdivision agreement and allow us then to regulate development in an appropriate way in the municipality. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, and I agree. It's difficult sitting in this chair, right? Because we do have rules we have to follow, and if something meets all the regulations, if we say no, we get ourselves in a situation where someone else will decide, and that's what makes it difficult. So, but yet I hear people. It's not that I don't hear people. We just want to do this in a way that that's the best way to move forward. So what I'm wondering, is there a win-win situation? Is there an idea? And this is, if you're able to, Daryl, shed any light on that, is there another way to do this that maybe can keep everyone happy? I don't know. I'm asking you. I'm not the expert.
First off, within the context of provincial policy, your official plan, the county's official plan, from a planning perspective, planning staff believe this is an appropriate development. Secondly, I understand and appreciate the concerns expressed with the lack of, or the loss of open space. This is private property, it's not a public park that they're losing. The ends of the cul-de-sacs, yes, I don't know about younger people, but I certainly spent a lot of time playing road hockey, and I remember yelling car, and you grab your net and you get out of the way. However, the planning department has no documentation whatsoever that would suggest that this property was ever intended for parkland. It's now before council in the form of a development application, and in all candor, it's not the developer's responsibility to solve a parkland deficiency in the municipality. This property is clearly too small to accommodate the 5% land as opposed to cash in lieu. So at some future point, the municipality perhaps could consider a park in a neighboring development nearby.
Thank you, Mr. Ty. Any other questions? Councilor Bailey?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Daryl. I asked him a question earlier. I believe Councilor Rowley just asked the same one, so I just want to ask it again to make sure I understand. For the connecting of Foxton and Deerfield, that's all on the developer's property. That's not currently encroaching on the other lands?
Through the chair, the proposed Street A is entirely on the developer's property. Where it connects to the end of Deerfield and Foxton is municipal property.
You have a follow-up?
More of a, I'm going to agree with the deputy mayor. It's in our hands. We're in a difficult spot, and I completely understand when we talk about kids playing ball hockey. We all did it, and I'm not ashamed to say that I still do it. I still have 2 young kids. I'm involved in minor hockey, so I 100% understand that. I know a lot of the kids that live on those 2 streets. But like the deputy mayor said, it's following all the rules and the regulations, so it's a difficult choice, but it's one we have to make here, or somebody else is going to make it for us.
Any other questions? Councilor Tadman?
Am I correct in saying also that if we, for whatever reason, which we can't seem to find a reason at this point to turn it down, if this went to LPAT, because you are a professional planner, you wouldn't be able to defend it because you're suggesting that we move forward with it. So then that would cost the taxpayers, all the taxpayers, for that hearing. And if we lose, then there's more cost altogether, and the developer would still be able to move forward. Am I correct in saying that?
That's if we were to deny the application.
That's what I'm talking about.
Through the chair, planning staff make recommendations, obviously council makes the decision. If in the event council were to disregard the recommendation of staff and act in the alternative, then that would, in this case, I would be conflicted. And if there were an appeal to LPAT, then I would not be in a position to continue to act on behalf of the municipality, but rather I would fully anticipate that I would receive a subpoena on behalf of the appellant if the developer chose to follow that route. So therefore, I would be appearing at an LPAT hearing, giving evidence against my counsel.
And just, perhaps this is something we mentioned at the end, but since we're here now, anybody in the province of Ontario may appeal this, whatever decision gets made by council, be it in the affirmative or against.
That's correct.
And that information is available through the planning office if anyone has interest. Is that true?
That's correct. And on the notices, Your Worship, we indicate a website that people can go to where they can easily locate all of the appeal forms and guidelines.
The planner for the applicant, perhaps it is the applicant, mentioned 3 things. One, the removal of section 3 and 10B from the conditions and notes to final approval, and in addition to section 1 being this report. I'm curious if you could speak to that.
Yes, the planner for the developer did bring those to my attention. The first two proposed deletions, if you will, came as a result of changes to the draft plan only on Friday. And so those two proposed conditions do become redundant. Staff have no issues with those being deleted for the conditions. The third condition is actually a stock or a template condition, and staff would have no difficulty with that when we're deleted as well.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councilor LeBlanc.
Through you, Chair, I have two questions. One is, the council's put in a situation because of acts in the past where 82% of the lots in the housing that was approved in this town were single dwellings. Now we're being forced by the province, I'm going to get to a question, to go to infilling, affordable housing, and duplexes. And under Bill 108, we don't know how much further it's going to go. And also having to increase our density into our downtown core of 42%. Am I wrong with that?
Through the chair, certainly it's common knowledge that the development trend in the past in Brighton has been primarily single detached dwellings. However, as a consequence of changes at the provincial level, which have filtered down through the county official plan and the municipality official plan, intensification and infilling are now being promoted, if not mandated. However, there's another factor that comes into play, and that is a shifting demographic, because both in terms of people who moved to Brighton 15 years ago, 20 years ago, moved into a new single detached dwelling, they're now coming to the planning department asking where they could relocate to. They don't want to leave the municipality. However, their current property is too much for them. We do not have an alternative. So, consistent with provincial policy, this proposed development is providing an alternative. It's also providing an alternative for young families who perhaps are unable to acquire one of the other single detached dwellings in one of the subdivisions.
We have a follow-up, Councilor LeBlanc?
Yes, through you, Chair. On Deerfield, there was a proposed road that was supposed to connect to Toby development. There's still an open space there. Would that be sufficient enough for a park?
Through the chair, I would sincerely doubt it.
I think it's on Foxton.
It's on Foxton, yeah.
Yes.
So
I would sincerely doubt it. It's actually slightly bigger than a building lot.
Deputy Mayor. No, you're good? Councilor Tadman.
Just want to remind everybody that there is a park up the street on Cedar Street that's never used. And it's a big park, they're all fenced in.
Any other questions from members of council? Councilor Anderson.
Some of the, a lot of the topics that were brought forward tonight was about living and the ambience of your neighborhood, the kids, where to play, trees, things like that. Can we get, can the developer, or can we ask the developer to be sympathetic to that? And then the roadway, can it, there's trees along it on the tree line, on the property line, I hear. Can things like that be, can we be sympathetic to some of that? And speed limit, safety was an issue. We're talking about barriers, guardrails. I think that might be a little extreme, but you know, what is the speed limit going to be through there? So can those things be addressed well ahead of time? So safety maybe isn't quite the issue, and the appearance of the streetscape is more in tune to their liking.
So I see the developer's engineer making some notes, and I would anticipate that he would make comment when I ask for that. With regard to that, as with regard to safety and speed limits, that's up to council what we set there, and we have asked for, through our strategic plan, a comprehensive review of speed limits in the municipalities, not especially, but including in subdivisions like this one. So I would anticipate we'd see that come forward in the coming year or so. I can't remember where it is on the strat plan. Anything else from council? So I'll ask if the owner or applicant wishes to make any final comments. Gentlemen?
Thank you. Again, it's Brian Keane. I'm the engineer in the project. And I made a few notes and some questions that have come up. I think one thing I want to speak to was a little bit about the trees. Certainly we're going to be adding trees to the boulevard area, and that'll come out in a later design. Second question that the people had was related to stormwater management. And certainly there's been some flooding, I think, on the north end of Fox End in the past, some poor drainage up through there. And one thing I want to point out was that this development, along with Toby and along with whoever's buying Clamp, intended to put in 3 new catch basins to go up north to capture that water. On this development here, the storm sewer has been extended right up to the top cul-de-sac there, and there's another catch basin put in off the road to help capture any water that's been sitting around. So I think there's been a lot of improvement by this design to stormwater management. Okay, so you may see there, just in the green at the top there, it's just sort of covered by the green, the top end of that cul-de-sac, there's a catch basin being extended up through there. So it certainly addresses concerns with drainage. Stormwater management, again, we went through quite a bit of review on stormwater management to assure everyone that the design was robust and that there would be no increase in water flowing off the site. One thing I also wanted to point out was that we heard the residents who were looking for some of that cul-de-sac feeling to be left behind. So you will see that a portion of the cul-de-sac does get left behind. The idea would have been, well, the idea would be you just take a 9-meter road and go straight through. The cul-de-sacs would have been removed. So we've left portions of the cul-de-sacs to give them a little bit more of a community space. The other thing about cul-de-sacs, I heard some conversation about dead ends being different than cul-de-sac. They are the same. So when you come into a cul-de-sac, you've got nowhere to go, you got to turn around and leave again. That's the same as a dead end. What this connection will do is it does allow for a second means of egress for any of these residents. If you look up at Foxden Drive, they come in off of Land Street, and they have to leave by Land Street to go to Foxden Drive. Here they can come down and connect through Deerfield and then down through to Raglan. So it does give another means of egress, which is something that is sought after by municipalities. And then finally, safety and speed limits. You can't turn a corner fast here. These are 90-degree corners, so there's going to be no speeding through here. You can't really get up to speed. It's only about 80 meters between one street and the next, so you can't really get up to a high speed. So there should be no concerns with safety in this area. And I guess lastly, the expropriation. I've heard that term. There is no expropriation. The lands available are sufficient to build this road. So there's no requirement for expropriation. In fact, it's made it more possible for the landowner to the north to be able to have severances should they wish. Those are all the comments.
Thank you, Mr. King. Mr. Leger, do you want to make any final comments?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you. Mr. Ty, do you have any final comments?
Nothing further.
Thank you. Does council wish to make a decision at this time on the plan of subdivision application and the zoning bylaw amendment application? Yes? So I do have a motion in front of me. Would it need to be amended to make those amendments that we had discussed, or how would we move forward with that? Well, why don't I read the motion, and we can make a decision from there. I have a motion moved by Councilor Bateman, seconded by Councilor Anderson. The council receives the report prepared by the municipal planning consultants regarding applications for approval of a plan of subdivision, file number sub 2019-01, and rezoning application file number Z06-2019, for lands located in Part Lot 2, Concession 1 being Part 1 of Plan 39R 13626 in the municipality of Brighton. That council grant draft plan approval to sub 2019-01 Cardinal View, subject to the conditions and notes to final approval that are attached, for a total of 8 lots comprising 4 semi-detached dwellings, 8 units, and 1 block for 0.3 meter reserve as illustrated on the draft plan of subdivision prepared by RFA Planning Consultants Incorporated and certified by Kerry Bain, OLS, dated February 11th, 2019, and revised August 21st, 2019. And the council enacts a bylaw to rezone certain lands located in Part Lot 2, Concession 1, being Part 1 of Plan 39R 13626, in the municipality of Brighton from future development zone to urban residential to exception number 40 holding zone. I'll open the floor to discussion. So I'll ask again, how would we capture those 3 amendments if we wanted to do so?
Through the chair, I would suggest for council's consideration that your motion be revised to simply reflect where it says the conditions, together with changes to conditions or revisions to conditions 1, 3, and 10 as identified during the council session.
Councilor Bateman, as the mover, are you okay with adding that?
Yeah, I'm just going to clarify, is it 10 or 10B?
It's 10B, but if we say, you can say whatever. I can just say 10B.
10B.
Yeah, okay. So the second paragraph in the motion will be amended with permission of Councilors Bateman and Anderson. The council grant draft plan approval to sub 2019-01, subject to the conditions and notes to final approval that are attached, together with changes to 1, 3, and 10B as discussed during the statutory public meeting. Is that okay with you, Councilor Bateman?
Yes.
Councilor Anderson is the seconder. Is there any further discussion? Councilor LeBlanc.
I would like to have a report with you.
I'll just make sure we're done with the discussion before we go down that road. Is there any further discussion? Okay, so I will get the clerk to call the recorded vote, but I'm going to add that note, that change right here before we head down that road. So our recorded vote is called in alphabetical order, starting with the member who called the vote. And the vote is called by the clerk. Madam Clerk, it was Councilor LeBlanc who asked for the recorded vote.
Councillor LeBlanc,
Yes.
Councillor Emily Rowley,
Yes.
Councillor Mary Tadman,
Yes.
sorry, Deputy Mayor Laura Vink,
Yes.
Councillor Ron Anderson,
Yes.
Councillor Mark Bateman,
Yes.
Mayor Brian Ostrander,
Yes.
and it's carried.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councilor Bateman, seconded by Councilor Anderson, that council move out of the October 15th, 2019 statutory public meeting at 8:18 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. We have 5 planning reports this evening, starting with a request for continued use, temporary use bylaw.
Maybe he might want to recess for a minute.
Maybe we'll take a moment. Let's take a 10-minute recess while the gallery clears. It's 8:31 PM. I am going to call the meeting back to order, so those of you who still intend to vacate, I'll ask that you do it as quietly as you possibly can.
This gentleman you're talking to, Joe.
We'll move into planning and development reports. As I mentioned before, our first one is a request for continued temporary use. Mr. Tai, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Nothing further. Council, this is a continuation of the decision the council passed in September 2016 to grant temporary use for this property. The farmer in question simply wishes to continue with that use.
Thank you, Mr. Tai. I have a motion moved by Councilor Rowley, seconded by Councilor Tadman. The council receives the report regarding request for continued temporary use as prepared by the municipal planning consultant, and the council enacts a bylaw authorizing the mayor and deputy clerk to sign an agreement with Philip and Tyler Mutton. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Second report is proposed 2020 fee policy schedules for the Lower Trent. Mr. Tai, we read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Nothing related to the report specifically, however, by coincidence, it's quite timely given that the new CAO for Lower Trent came forward this evening, and I believe we're both talking about the same initiative. However, either through the planning department or perhaps through the municipality CAO, my suggestion would be to contact the Lower Trent and request to be advised of the outcome of their meeting with the ministry.
Thank you, Mr. Tai. So I'll read the, I don't think the motion contradicts that at all. So a motion moved by Councilor Rowley, second by Councilor Blanc. The council receives a report regarding the proposed 2020 fees policy and schedules as prepared by the municipal planning consultant, and that council directs staff to commence with a detailed assessment of the scope, current service delivery as provided by the Lower Trent Conservation. And that would include contacting them with regard to that. So is there any further discussion, or any discussion at all? Councilor Rowley.
Thank you. As per Mr. Tai's suggestion, would that mean that maybe the CAO would sit in on a meeting like that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly I would work in consultation with Rhonda Bateman with respect to what the changing mandate is going to be. Obviously, there's great interest to Brighton, and all the lower tier municipalities that are impacted by the new legislation. We need to keep a close eye on it and understand what the implications are going to be to us. So I'll be actively involved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Our next report is with regard to Brighton Affordable Housing Strategy. Mr. Tai, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Through the chair, only that the report is intended to provide feedback or comment to the county prior to them coming forward with their presentation to the council, and staff are suggesting that we advance a copy of the report as per their request.
Thank you, Mr. Tai. I have a motion moved by Councilor Tadman, seconded by Councilor LeBlanc. The council receives the report regarding Brighton Affordable Housing Strategy for information, and the council directs staff to submit a copy of the report to the county and SHS consultants representing the council and the municipality of Brighton's comments on the proposed strategy. Is there any discussion? Councilor Rowley.
Thank you. Did I read where that needs to be done by the 18th of this month? So are we prepared for that already? Did I read that for my...
Your microphone, please.
I'm sorry. Did I read that? That comments need to be in by the 18th?
That's
which
correct.
is like in 2 days?
Yes, that's correct.
And we're there?
We're simply proposing, staff are simply proposing that we forward a copy of this report, which will serve to satisfy their 18th deadline.
Okay.
And on the second page or third page, whatever it is, attachment number 1, action items, that would be the
This is
that would be the substance of the report for Brighton's housing strategy.
just making sure.
Okay. Anything further? All in favor? Or any opposed? Motion is carried. Public report is a proposed amendments to the Aggregate Resource Act. Mr. Ty, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Nothing further.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc. The council receives the report regarding amendments to the Aggregate Resources Act, RSO 1990 for information as prepared by the municipal planning consultants. And the council directs staff to submit a copy of the report to the province representing the council of the municipality of Brighton's comments on the proposed regulatory changes. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. It is, but go ahead.
Does, you can wait, Mr. Mayor, it's my turn. Does this in any way affect the one application, White's Road, the Hunt property? Is there anything in here that would give change to that?
Through the chair, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And our final staff report is with regard to Butler Creek condominiums. Mr. Ty, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Only to clarify for individuals who have expressed an interest in this particular application as a result of it appearing on the agenda. This is merely the beginning of the process. Up until now, what we have completed is specifically the circulation of the applications and the materials to all the review agencies for review and comment, as well as the peer review engineers for the municipality. I've also set up meetings with the internal staff as well as the consultants to further explore their assessment of the project.
So this begins the application process. It provides council with a heads up that it may be coming down the pike at some point. There will be opportunity for the public to make comment.
That's great.
And that's done formally through your office, and then of course again at a statutory public meeting at some point in the future.
That's correct. And following this evening, the other reason for the report is to formally acknowledge that there is an application or applications. Anyone having an interest is welcome to contact Sharp Road, and I would just sit down with them and we can review the documentation.
Members of the public may do that at any time.
That's correct.
Thank you. I'm going to read the motion first. Here we'll go. I have a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor, or maybe I already did.
Keep it.
Anyway, motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Tadman. The council receives the report regarding the proposed Butler Creek condominiums for information as prepared by the municipal planning consultants. Councillor Tadman.
Correct me if I'm wrong, through you, Mayor, don't you correct me, please, I'm directing this to the planner. There is going to be some designated land for parkland in this, as I read it.
I can answer that if you want, Darrell. Go ahead, Mr. Ty.
Through the chair, the proposal at this particular point in time is setting aside certain lands for parkland, and the intent so far is to allow the continuation of the Butler Trail.
And that was my next question. So that's the link that we've been waiting to join up from Butler Creek South and then extending it through. So that is a really good thing that's going to happen.
That's one of the two links. The other one being further to the to the north and west. Any other questions, Councillor? Pardon me, Deputy Mayor Vink.
Thank you. Just a question. Whenever we have these large developments, we do get a lot of questions and concerns from people. And some of the things that come up are, is there enough water, sewer? Is there enough parking spaces? By increasing the number of homes on that side of the tracks, does it affect fire services? Does that affect, the number of staff? And so I guess, are you able to give us a little bit of an idea on how that works? I mean, I know there are regulations as far as water and sewer. I mean, is there a study done? Can you explain a little bit of that so that it helps us all to be a bit more informed as far as these large developments and how we go about approving them?
Through the chair, actually with any type of development, bigger of this nature, there is a broad range of studies that are required. With this one, for example, stormwater, servicing, traffic, EIS. And all of those reports are individually circulated to all ministries and agencies, whether it's their area of expertise or not, as well as to internal staff. And for example, additional developments of the tracks, we would turn to the fire chief for his input. With respect to the EIS, we would turn to, in stormwater, we would turn to the Conservation Authority, as well as our own peer review engineers, to provide us with their expertise and feedback. With respect to the planning report itself, we review that internally, and then we take all of the information accumulated or gathered from all of the other participating individuals or agencies in order to ensure that we're satisfying efficient land policy, the PPS, and so on. One oversight that or occurrence that took place actually with our public meeting this evening, I have received several emails leading up to the public meeting, but after, before notice had been given, looking for information. Staff repeatedly invited those individuals to come into the planning office. We would sit down with them, and with the exception of the one delegation, the first delegation, no one else took us up on our suggestion to come in. And I would simply encourage the residents in the area for this particular development or any other plan of subdivision or condominium, just get a look at the material, and we can talk about their concerns. Lots of times we can answer their questions or concerns at that particular point in the process, as opposed to waiting until a statutory public meeting to have it all come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Anderson. I've heard some questions regarding like site plan, and I know it's way too early for that, but eventually it's going to come down to it, just talking about how some of these fourplexes back onto residents that are in the area right now or are nearby. So where can they put their input? Can they put some input into that? Excuse me.
Through the chair, a resident in the area or anywhere in the municipality for that matter can offer their input, express their concerns anytime they like, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's at the statutory public meeting. Any input that we receive with respect to the overall design, or concerns with respect to the existing street connections, what have you. Actually, if we receive that input early, we in turn will flip it either over to our own public works and or the developers, excuse me, in order that they can assess whether or not they need to make some changes in their design.
So, are we okay for some discussion?
As long as it's with regard to the motion, which is a planning report for information with regard to Butler Creek condominiums. Carry on.
Great. So for the information about the Creek condominium, what if there seems to be a lot pushed into that area without any parkland? The parkland would come from what they're donating to the community. The question is, would we have a say in that? Like, there's a lot of parking spaces. There's no garages. There's and they're fourplexes. Maybe I went to Coburg on the weekend. I should have gone to Port Hope. I understand there's a development there, but to get an idea, perhaps some of them can be modeled after some of those. How can we have input into that, where maybe there's things such as 10 plexes and 15 plexes, and they take up less space, and they might be more affordable, to use an expression. Maybe they're, I don't know about the cost, maybe the cost to build those is less, where we can put even more density in there. I don't want more density necessarily, but there'll be more green space. We talked about trees. I don't see any trees in any of that, but maybe we can have some say in that early, not later putting up barriers and things like that.
Well, certainly through the chair, certainly if members of council,
I'm still learning.
not unlike the public, have input into the conceptual design, then that opportunity is always there. Keep in mind though that these are applications that have been formally submitted to the municipality under the Planning Act with a fee, a prescribed fee, and we're administering that process. So if the municipality is looking at tweaking the design, if you will, either through input from the ratepayers or from council, then it would probably be helpful if we receive that input early.
And we have to remember this is a condominium application too, right?
Yes.
So it's a bit of a different ballgame probably.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm also able to advise council that the developer who has, I believe, completed similar projects in Coburg and Portland, and this individual does follow one specific model.
We know. And I would, I'd also point out for council's information, the amount of parkland that's being suggested to be deeded is significant in this particular application. Deputy Mayor? Councilor Ty.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been around and Councilor Rowley long enough to know that the developers don't want to make bad plans. So if you approach someone before it comes to the table, I've seen compromises lots of times. So as the planner is saying, you're better to go to the planning department with your concerns than to wait until it's a public meeting. Because, you know, there's ways of tweaking any kind of a subdivision.
Yeah, it's too late sometimes.
No, it's not too late now.
Certainly not at this stage. Any further discussion? Councilor Rowley.
Thank you. Just want to take a note from the previous application that we talked about, Mr. Ty, that the subject lands are also within the built boundary, and so they will also be subject to section B9 under the official plan of the county regarding a certain percentage of infilling. This would count as part of that.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Councilor LeBlanc.
Through you, Chair, I believe the amount they wanted to donate for parkland was 9.7 acres when I read it. The question I have is while I was there for the traffic study, you saw me there, I was reading the traffic study because some citizens called me, they wanted to know if there's a traffic study. So there is a traffic study. But when I read it, is there any way you can go back to the consultant to ask them to tweak it, to make tables, so they don't have to go back to all the data till 2027, so they can read a table, this is what the traffic and this is what is going to be increasing. And because it's a speed limit of 60 kilometers, and you're going to have, 130 meters of view on each side.
Through the chair, certainly staff can take that suggestion back. I've long since learned reluctantly that traffic engineers have a very specific way of analyzing and presenting reports. Whether or not our suggestion is accepted is another question.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councilor Bateman.
Thank you. Would you be able to explain to me, I'm not sure if I'm the only one, but section 9(6) Condominium Act that permits the property owner to make the application, how that exemption works?
That particular provision in the Condominium Act allows a developer, subject to previously going through an application process, to toward the end of the exercise, then seek condominium exemption. There would still be agreements involved, but he would be allowed, subject to council approval, to forego the draft plan of condominium exercise. The alternative in this case is that we would be capturing all of the same reviews and opportunities for comment through detailed site plan approval.
Anything further? All in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. There's no unfinished business this evening, so we move into bylaws. A motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Tadman. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw under the provisions of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990,
No.
to amend
You missed page 3.
Okay.
to amend bylaw number 140, 2002, as otherwise amended, of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton as it applies to certain lands located in Part Lot 2, Concession 1, being Part 1 of Plan 39R 13626 in the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Vinks, seconded by Councilor Bateman. The council gives this bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute an agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton and Philip and Tyler Mutton regarding the temporary use of a park model trailer on property located in Park Lot 9, Concession 5 in the municipality of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Now we have come to question period, which is an opportunity for anyone in the gallery to ask questions with regard to an item on our agenda this evening. Beating that one to death, haven't we? All right. We have no in-camera session. Our confirmatory bylaw is moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson. The council gives a bylaw for second and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton planning meeting held on October 15th, 2019. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. And finally, I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman. That the October 15, 2019 planning meeting adjourn at 8:53 p.m. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you, everyone.